Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest Kevin Ladd, who's here to share with us his book, GBOGFY, The Earnest Pursuit of Personal Growth. What if the life you've always wanted begins with a simple decision to step outside of your comfort zone? Most of us would be a little afraid to do that, and today's guest is here to share with us how to do just that. Kevin Ladd grew up in a small town in Maine where a love for drawing, listening to and playing music, and hands-on work took early root, long before he ever imagined writing a book. After years of carpentry, cooking, and 7-day work weeks, he moved to Chicago, where he eventually helped build scholarships.com and built a life on his own, somewhat unconventional terms. So welcome to the show, Kevin Ladd.
Thanks, Marianne. It's great to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
What a great honor it is to have you here, and not only to talk about your life and your experience, but your book. What inspired you to write that?
Well, I was trying to figure out a way that I could keep talking even when I'm not talking. I think I've just always been the kind of person that I like to create things. And it's been probably over a decade that I've been entertaining the notion of writing a book. And then I got to a point, I think, where I'd done enough things where kind of a small fraction of what I've done to this point could make a 250-page book. So I started writing it.
Well, it's interesting when we dive into writing a book, just how much of ourselves we pull, like really pour into this. So can you share a little bit about your story with us?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good point that you make. And I think there's certain things that are maybe cliche or things that people might say that you're like, oh yeah, I've heard that before. Like that writing a book is therapeutic, and I think the reason that everyone says it is because it's true. I don't think you can write a memoir. I mean, sure, you could. Even if you wrote fiction, I'm sure in some ways that's therapeutic as well. It's just a different type. But when you're writing your memoirs and you're trying to select which stories to tell, and you're researching the tiny, tiny town of 48 people that your dad grew up in the 1930s and 40s. It just brings out a lot of things that you just probably didn't anticipate, especially like in my case, it's my first time doing this. So for one, it was very therapeutic. It was this self-discovery, I think is a good phrase. Maybe just learning more about yourself and understanding relationships about yourself that I have sort of figured out more so since I wrote the book. My dad passed in 2023 in March. And so having a couple of years between him passing and me starting writing the book, I think was a really, really good thing. I didn't plan it that way. I didn't schedule it as such. It just, enough time had passed that I was able to really be honest with myself and in my book about my relationship with my father and how that affects me. And I think a lot of men, grown men my age or even younger, can attest that the relationship with one's dad can be a little bit complicated. So my story is a pretty basic one about a young kid who grew up pretty poor in a small town in southern Maine and born to a couple that were from even smaller towns. And the biggest thing that I got from writing it, I think, was just going through my entire history from the time I was born in the capital of Maine and raised in a small house in a small town to a relatively poor family, going to public school and working multiple jobs and always being employed and always, kind of struggling and trying to figure out stuff. and how that translated to my professional life, and how I carried that with me, and how I brought that with me when I moved to Chicago when I was 29. I think my book is really, a lot of it is about how you start is kind of how you continue. I'm very fortunate. I thought I was unfortunate because I was born into like I said, a relatively, let's say, unwealthy family. I'm not going to say we weren't getting government cheese or anything, but we were close. And the only time I saw my mom cry was when she was doing the bills at the kitchen table sometimes. So that level of poor, and wishing I was rich, wishing a rich relative I didn't know I had would die and I'd inherit their money so I could do all the things that I wanted to do, like scuba dive and uh, ride motorcycles and all the fun stuff. And then not until I'm in my 20s, 30s, really realizing how fortunate I was to have been raised in an era where I was able to fail repeatedly, and where I was able to make mistakes and feel dumb and be critical of myself, but then also sometimes be proud of myself and just have all of that stuff instead of having someone to pave the way for me all the time. So um, my book is really about that. It's about me as a wildly imperfect person who is really, really happy and thrilled about being wildly imperfect.
I love that. I think that that is such a great message for so many people. And getting out there and failing, I mean, we learned so much from that. That's such a big experience. Some of my best lessons have been from my failures.
Absolutely. I think there's nothing like failure. Failure is the fastest path to success. I'm going to have a t-shirt made that says that, but it really is. I mean, you have to mess up. You have to know what it feels like, and you have to, not like it, but be forgiving of yourself. It's one of the most difficult things to learn is how to be corrected, and to know when someone's being critical of you constructively to help you, and when they're being, a not nice person to you because they have their own insecurities, which we all do. I have a lot to draw from as far as if I want to be self-deprecating in my humor. I think when I was younger, I might have been a little bit meaner in a sense because I was immature and I could get a laugh doing it. And so any attention is good attention. But I think now I realize the huge dearth of just data to draw from that I have, just stuff that I've done that didn't work out. And I also have that experience that, well, what happened next? What happens after you messed up? I almost invariably tried again because I'm a stubborn person. Stubborn sounds like a negative term. I don't think it is. I think it's determined. It's indefatigable, I think, is a wonderful word. Um, and so failure to me is just, oh, so that's how you don't do it. Let me see if I can try this other way and see if that's the way you do it. And sometimes it's 2 failures, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 200. And you just have to do it.
The subtitle of your book, The Earnest Pursuit of Personal Growth, is such a great subtitle for your book. How can someone transform skepticism into motivation for personal growth?
I think really it comes down to figuring out how to get a couple of small wins to build your confidence. I think I've decided that this has to be true. I believe that you build confidence at some point in your formative years between the ages of 13, 14, 15, whatever, and 25, 30, depending if you're a male or female. Men are much slower to mature than women are. I won't get into that, but I'm a man. So as a boy, there was just a lot of things. Like when I was really young, I discovered that I could draw. I was good at drawing. And in my mind, I had a nemesis. Deborah Pelletier was a great drawer, and she could draw horses. I couldn't. And she probably had no idea that we were nemesis. And we weren't really, but you know what I'm saying? It's you find a talent and you sort of cling to that. That's your life raft. Like, I'm good at this. This is my thing. And so I think in order to turn skepticism and self-doubt into confidence, and at the very least the willingness to try, you have to find something. You have to find a win. So what I typically did was I would try something that wasn't, the end of the world if it didn't work out. Try something that I call it a high percentage completion ratio. Like, so if you're a coach and you have a quarterback and you wanted to build his confidence, you give them a bunch of screen passes, the short distance, not a like a high percentage likelihood that they'll catch the ball and it'll be a positive outcome. That's the first thing you have to do. And my early formative years and mid formative years and even late formative years were learning how to cook, learning how to build stuff, getting just gradually day after day getting better, learning patience, being patient with yourself, being patient with progress. No one picks up a circular saw and cuts a straight line the first time. No one knows inherently how to do anything of import or of value. You just have to be patient with yourself and be willing to let the process take some time. And so I think that's the key. It's just figuring out what's the thing that I'm likely to be able to succeed doing, setting out to do something in that vein, and then allowing it to take place and allow it to take time, and then allowing yourself to take credit and giving yourself credit for being good at that one project that you did and say, okay, if I did that project, maybe I can do a slightly more difficult project. And I think it's building blocks. It's starting, it's foundation, it's growing.
So, what role does curiosity play in helping people create a more meaningful and fulfilling life?
I love curiosity. I think curiosity is the thing. I'm getting goosebumps. I'm not even kidding. I wish I was. I'm such a dork. I am so grateful for my curiosity. I think it's the biggest. Everyone says superpower. It's like a thing. Everyone says rock star was a thing for a while. Now it's superpower. I think curiosity. If you're curious and you want to know and you, God willing, need to know, you're going to investigate. If you investigate, you're going to learn. And if you learn, you're going to build on that curiosity. You're going to say, well, now I know this little bit about this giant thing, because everything's a giant thing. Like if you like watches or if you like motorcycles or if you like cars or if you like houses, whatever it is, as soon as you delve into it with that curiosity, you're doomed to learn to the point where you're going to start spending a lot of time and energy and sometimes money on this thing, because these things don't shrink, they grow. That's how it's been for motorcycles with me. That's how it's been for almost everything that I've done. So you have to be careful where you invest your curiosity and you don't want to invest it in stuff like, drugs and alcohol, because it will grow. You want to invest it in stuff like writing or riding a motorcycle or travel. Like things like that are they don't shrink, they grow. And the more they grow, the more you appreciate the potential they have to continue to grow. And I think the older we all get, it makes us happy to realize that our lives aren't shrinking. I'm 57 years old, just turned 57. I had a heart attack a few months ago. And I didn't panic and I didn't cry and I didn't worry I was going to die. I made jokes. I tried to entertain the people who were trying to take care of me. And I had this confidence for some reason that I wasn't going to die. And I think it was just because I was like, well, if I'm wrong, I'll be dead. So who cares? But I think I'm going to be right. And I was. And thank God I had really good people treating me that knew what they were doing, that cared about what they were doing. But I also don't think it hurts to have that attitude. It could definitely hurt to have the other attitude, but it can't hurt to have the attitude of, I'm not going to die right now. It's not my time. I don't want to. I'm not ready to. Not that I'm scared to, just that I don't think it's going to happen. And it didn't.
Well, you've really been through a lot, and having that positive mindset, I think, makes such a big deal. I've often heard people say, well, I think I'm going to get sick if I do this or that or the other. And then they end up getting sick. It's like you're kind of programming your body for what's going to happen. So, being in such a positive mindset and going through something so serious, you're already saying, hey, I've got this.
I mean, that's kind of the only explanation for me. I mean, kind of the point of my book is there's all these famous people that have billions of dollars and millions of dollars that'll tell you like their secret to how they did what they did. And it's not something that you can really realistically believe, in my opinion. I'm just a guy who's relatively successful given where I started and who's pretty happy about the way things have turned out based on the very realistic kind of things that I did. And that was just literally being a young man in a small town with probably a relatively high IQ. I'm going to say I'm above average in intelligence, but not a genius level, not by any stretch. but just a relatively intelligent person with a decent IQ who, for a long time, I was negative. There was periods of my life where I was probably in some way depressed. Um, and I just was looking at things the wrong way. I just was looking at the negative things. I was overweight and I was unpopular and I was a teenager. And like teenagers go through this, even the ones that are popular and they're not overweight, they still are miserable in some ways because they're teenagers. And that's part of being a teenager, I think. But for me, I can only speak to what my experience was. I wasn't special. I was just this average height, average, person in so many ways. And I knew I was special in that my mom thought I was special and that um, I was me and no one else is me, but I didn't know what made me me. And so I think what it took was years and years and years of literally public education, getting excellent grades until I was about in high school, and then getting crappy grades because I just didn't care. I didn't have money to go to college. I didn't have interest in going to college. I didn't know what college would do for me. My parents would tell me that you have to go to college, that that's the only way. Now it's the 80s, it's whatever. I didn't buy into it. And the job that I wanted was I wanted to design album covers for, first it was LPs when I was in the 70s when I was a kid. And then it was cassette tapes. And then at least the medium got a little bigger with CDs because the CD cases are bigger than cassettes. But that's what I want to do. I love music and I love drawing and I love Jacques Cousteau and I love Evel Knievel. I just love these certain things, a set of things. And I had to try to figure out what I was going to do. And I spent decades of working in restaurants, working in construction sites, working every day. For 5 years in a row, I worked basically every day except for holidays. And just asking people who were 20 years older than me, like, how do you have two cars? How do you live in a house versus an apartment? How do you afford to like whip out your credit card after dinner and insist on paying when it's $200+? And then I just had to keep doing that for, a couple of decades. And that's a big part of that is saying, I can do this. It's saying, I'm not doing this right now. It doesn't seem to be happening super fast, but I can do it. I'm not, if everyone else can do this, why can't I do it? Anything that you think you can't do, go ahead and Google or go to ChatGPT or whatever and look up and say, how many plumbers are there? How many heart surgeons are there? How many motorcycle stuntmen are there? How many whatever? And you'll see that the number is pretty big. And when you see how big the number is, you'll have to ask yourself, well, if that many people can do this, why can't I do it?
I think that is a great question. I mean, so what advice would you have for someone who feels stuck but isn't really sure, like, what's the first step to take?
My advice is always there's no one who doesn't have something that interests them. It could be butterflies or it could be frogs, it could be crows, it could be, I mean, there's so many intelligent creatures on the planet you could just look into and research. But whatever your interest is, you follow it and you get creative about it. You dedicate a certain amount of time to it, and then you figure out how can you interact with this topic. Have you always wanted to learn how to draw? My dad, when he was working, would always threaten to become a painter when he retired. He was going to learn how to paint. He was going to paint, and he'd watch Bob Ross and the other guy, the German guy, I can't remember his name. And he promised himself that when he had the time, which between you and me, he always kind of had enough time to do that if he wanted to, but he was going to sort of delve into that. So I think it's just a matter of each person saying, well, what is something that interests me that doesn't, it's not about someone else. It's not about my job. It's not about my wife or my kids. It's for me. And then just trying it and being willing to suck at it for a while, and just because most likely you're going to. And then the most important thing too is to be patient with yourself. I have a few guitars that I'm probably not worthy of owning them. That's something I would say that's self-deprecating with myself. Like I have a couple of Paul Reed Smith guitars. They're really nice guitars. They're beautiful. They're made in Baltimore. And again, that's another thing you can get into that could cost you a lot of money if you get too into it. But there's also plenty of used guitars on the market. But anyway, I for a while took lessons and I practiced as little as possible, and I would kick myself for it. I would ask myself, well, why are you taking these lessons and paying this person to teach you if you're just going to spend as little time as possible practicing? And then I would have to, kind of That's fair. Okay. I should be questioning myself, my effort, my lack of effort, or whatever. But then I'd also have to forgive myself so I could, sleep at night and not feel too bad. And that's the balance. It's about figuring out something that you think you might want to do, allowing yourself to delve into it, allowing yourself to not be good at it for a long time. And then also, I think it's important to mark your progress and to be like, well, even if this isn't perfect yet, or it's not even that good yet, it's still better than it was 3 weeks ago when I started, 15 hours ago, whatever it was. So my advice for everyone is the first step is to realize that you believe that if I had this thing, it could be knitting, cross stitch, it could be drawing, painting, could be just walking, jogging, and increasing the time you spend and the miles you cover. If you allow yourself to start something, then you're giving yourself permission to basically take as long as it takes to get better at it. Your boss won't do that most times. They're going to expect results within a certain time frame, and your husband or wife or your kids, they might have demands, and they're not being unfair. They just have a timeline, like everything does. But if you can find something that doesn't have a timeline, that's just for you, and it could be reading, it could be absolutely anything, it could be history, like whatever. It's just creating space and time for yourself, even if it's only a couple hours a week, because you have 4 kids that are still all in school, and you have a husband or wife, or you have parents who are sick. It's critical to figure out what the thing is that will give you a break from all of that and engage your brain. And it's also a good preparation for retirement at some point when you're not challenging yourself professionally because you're retired and God forbid you can afford to not have to work for someone. Having something that can keep your brain nimble and agile and fluid, so you don't lose that ability. This is sort of it, especially if you're my age, if you're in your 50s and retirement's not far away. Figure out what it is, because you're going to be doing a lot of it when you're 65 or 67 years old.
So, to dovetail with that, in your book, you write about having a maker's mindset. What does that mean, and how can people develop that?
I we are such consumers. There's so much out there that I am. I have Amazon. I have Amazon deliveries so frequently, and my wife comments on it quite a bit, and she's justified in doing so. It's ridiculous, but um, consuming is just this is America. This is us. This is what we do, and it's fine. And it gives you a little bit of a dopamine rush to acquire something and to have something new to play with. But when you make something, I mean, it's like the healthiest rush. I've never done hard drugs, and I don't recommend. I couldn't recommend, but I'm glad I haven't. I never wanted to. I didn't want to be addicted to them. But I think probably the closest thing to doing something like that gives you that massive, massive rush of just whatever, feeling something. I built a table, a dining table. Uh, my wife wanted a table, so she worked at a store that in the North Shore of Chicago, which is a wealthy part of the area, and these people would come in and buy tabletop stuff. And so when you're surrounded by that all the time, you get all these ideas. And like one of the ideas that she got was like, and she's very practical. She's like, it'd be great to have a dining table that had a couple of drawers that I could put all my tabletop stuff. So one of the things they sold was placemats. I can't remember I can't remember what it's called. And also cloth napkins and just nice stuff. And she's like, if we had drawers, I could stash that stuff in there. So I went and looked and found a decent hardwood table that was actually made out of hardwood. And I do have a background in carpentry and making stuff. So I'm pretty critical. And if it's a particle board with the laminate or veneer, I'm not buying it. So anyway, I found a table and it had one drawer. And it was kind of small. And it was like, whatever, $1,500, $2,000. And I was like, I could make that table for half, like $800 probably, even with the nicest possible wood. And what got me into that mindset was, what I started. Like I said, I was working at a restaurant. This carpenter comes in. He's a general contractor. He has experience, and I tell him, I love what you do. I love that you build houses. I love to learn how to do that. He hires me to do it. And that's how I started learning how to build stuff. And what it led to was I got to a point where I had the confidence of I can make a table. And I had worked at a cabinet shop when I was 18 years old, right out of high school, and I knew where to get drawer slides, and I knew I had a bit of confidence in putting together cabinets. I had some confidence from making countertops out of just particle board and laminate. And so I literally went out and found what's the hardest hardwood there is. I think Hatoba was, if not the hardest um, wood available. It was in the top three. And what it is basically marble, but it's wood. It's one of the slowest growing, slowest maturing trees from South America, where it's really wet. And so um, I literally almost burned out a motor on my table saw. I built this table, and because it was such a dense hardwood that it almost literally killed my table saw. But I built this table out of Hatoba. It's beautiful. It's red color. It's deep. It's gorgeous, and it's beautiful because I was able to choose the wood I wanted. I was able to select the height I wanted, and all that stuff started from having that mentality of like, I can make that. I think people generally have a mentality of when you tell them that, oh, I built this thing, I welded. They're like, oh my goodness, you welded? Welding? That's, oh my God, they think it's magic. And in some sense it is. You're holding lightning in your fingers and you're like melting steel together. It's incredible, but anyone can do it. Take a class, costs $150 for an hour or whatever. Like, if you can't get that money together, then ask, do a GoFundMe. But I mean, to me, the maker's mentality is just, yeah, of course you don't know how to do this. Why would you inherently know how to do this? Why don't you go figure out how to do it? And you'll be so glad, because then you can create your own world. Literally the bed that my wife and I slept on for a couple of decades, I made out of birch. She wanted a certain height bed. I made it exactly the height that I wanted. Like, I did that because I just had a little bit of confidence and some okay tools. And it literally saved me money over buying one. I think the maker's mentality, it both builds confidence, and it gives you satisfaction. Hanging out in the treehouse that you created is a lot better than finding one in the woods and hanging out and kind of, I wouldn't say stealing, but appropriating one.
It makes all the difference and you have that certain sense of pride when you make something and you're involved in creating something new.
Exactly. I think it's going away kind of fast. If you look at 100 years ago, we had blacksmiths and tanners and tinkers, and people made everything, and then their kids would hang out and learn that from the time they were little, and then they would take over the business. And I'm not saying that's the only way for things to be, and that's not even to say that that's the way things should be. I'm just saying that's the way that things have changed, is that just because and I know I'm 57. I'm Gen X. I'm not a boomer, but I'm not Gen Z either. It is a little bit nostalgic for me, and I do have that thing where I'm being from a small town, from a small state, and having done what I did professionally and learning both academically, going to art school, and then also learning from learning how to cook at a restaurant, which is kind of an apprenticeship in a way, without really calling it such. You're getting hired as a dishwasher, but if they see the potential in you, they'll train you to be a sous chef. And if you do well, they'll train you to be a chef. And that's what happened with me, because I had that potential. I had the relationship with the owner of the restaurant, my boss. And to this day, he's basically my second dad, the dad that I, sort of needed to have after the dad I was born having. I think if more people understood how to make things and were comfortable making things and felt that feeling of having made something, I just think that's a better solution to depression or symptoms of depression than trying to figure out what cocktail of drugs you should be taking. And I don't want to get too into that whole thing, but yeah, I think laughter maybe is the best medicine. The second best is probably creation of just absolutely anything.
So, what daily habits would you like to share with our audience that they can use to build confidence over time?
I think once you believe that, I don't believe in a lot of things. Like I just sort of like move through time and space, and I sort of appreciate what all the different cultures appreciate. I mean, if anything, I'd be more like Stoicism and Buddhism are kind of my thing, because it's all about looking inward and trying to find nirvana, and it's not about dogma or control or whatever. Um, but I think if there's one thing you should believe in, it's yourself. You can't do everything, but just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you can't do something. And that something can be anything. So we're talking about things. There's everything, there's something, there's anything. Um, it doesn't matter, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. Doesn't matter what you choose, but pick something and then just pursue it for a bit. It might become the thing that you really love doing and that you can use to build that confidence and to make things and be creative. It might lead to the thing that, it's like when you're dating in high school, and usually it's, you don't marry and have kids with the person you're dating when you're a junior in high school. It leads to the next one, to the next one, and each one sort of like kind of gives you information that you use and you carry it with you as you progress. But it doesn't matter where you land. It doesn't matter if you marry your high school sweetheart or your college sweetheart or someone you met when you're 27. It doesn't matter. It's just that you get started. You got to start dating. Start dating your ideas. Doesn't matter what they are. Again, as long as you're not putting someone else in harm's way, doesn't matter what you do, as long as you enjoy doing it and you can find some interest and you can build aptitude. I always think that aptitude is intelligence plus interest. So all you need is the intelligence to be able to comprehend and to handle and to move forward in the interest, and then you just need whatever the interest is, and that's your muse, that's your thing. It could be clay, it could be potholders, it doesn't matter what it is. And then you make an Etsy store, or do a Summerfest or whatever, and set up a 10 by 10 tent, and see if people are interested in the stuff that you made. That's I did that with my book it was interesting. I didn't kill it. I didn't sell a ton of books, but I had some great conversations with some very interesting people. And it was definitely a net loss. I spent way more than I made, but I benefited spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, immaturity, whatever you want to call it. I benefited so much from just saying yes and doing it, and letting the chips fall where they may. I think that's kind of the biggest thing, is you have to be willing to just put yourself out there and know that it could go potentially horribly, but still putting yourself out there regardless. I think that's the biggest thing, is just having that, being able to underthink something, not worrying about it, not losing sleep, but we're just being like, you know what, I'm going to do this. What's the worst that could happen? And usually the answer is not really that bad.
If someone feels it's too late to make a big change in their life, what would you tell them?
I mean, unless you're like horrifically disfigured or crippled, or I mean, there are some cases where people literally, they can't do what they were sort of designed to do. If you're a piano player and your hands both got amputated, you can't. Maybe it's too late. Maybe or maybe you should find a different thing that's sort of related to piano, like a different musical instrument, like singing, because you still have your vocals or whatever. But I think usually when you say it's too late, I'm too old, I think you're making excuses. And again, it's not 100% across the board, but I think most of the time it is. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to do any of this stuff. But I think if you could find something, I don't care if you're 15 or 50 or 60 or 70. If you're kind of bored, if you're kind of like, I don't know, mildly depressed, find a hobby, do something. There's so much out there. There's always this thing about like the movie Highlander, the concept of living forever, and the who wants to live forever sort of attitude. Like, I don't want to live forever. I am not scared of death. After 50, I was like, not afraid of death, but I don't want it. Like, I enjoy life. I love being able to do the stuff I do. But also, as long as I'm healthy and I feel good and I'm capable, I could live forever, because you could learn how to be a mechanic. You could learn how to disassemble stopwatches and rebuild them. there's so many things. Like, you could fill up thousands of years with all the things there are that you could be doing with your time and stimulating your brain and giving yourself those moments of pride and of, I learned that and I did this. And I think that's, to me, being, total disclaimer here, I'm not a professional psychologist, but I'm just saying, I think if everyone was able to find one thing that they were really interested in, that they gave themselves an hour or two a day to work on and to stimulate themselves, I believe that there would be a lot fewer people who were depressed and who were questioning, I don't know, you name it. They were just, I believe that's the best drug. I think, yes, laughter, and also figuring out what it is that really drives you, that makes you interested, that makes you want to do more, and then doing that.
I think it's such an important piece. You have a chapter in your book where you talk about saying yes. And I felt so compelled by that because how often do we say no to the things that maybe would bring us to a new awareness?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to opt in, and I say yes to a lot of things that I would rather not say yes to. And I do it out of just self-discipline, and because I have to be my own parent. My mom's not here to tell me you have to do this, so I have to do it. My wife's pretty good at doing it. Thank God for her. She knows when I know that I should do something, and she'll just kind of push a little bit, and that's enough. Um, I think saying yes to the things that you should say yes to is so important, and just the beginning of it. It's just, sometimes there's a one tiny 6-minute thing that happens out of the 2 hours you spent at this cocktail party or at this networking event or at this whatever. And that 6-minute thing that opens up ends up being like a friend that you'll have the rest of your life, or ends up being a professional contact that is so critical to you doing something that you need to do. Saying no is very critical, like saying no to things that are extremely dangerous, that don't have a lot of potential for coming out well. Like, you have to have that too. But everyone knows when they should say yes, but they don't, because when I was a kid, we had TV till 10 and whatever would come on, and again, being older, sometimes it gives you a little perspective. Staying home wasn't as sexy as it is now. Like, now you could binge a season of whatever and eat Haagen-Dazs or Ben and Jerry's, and there's staying home has so many things. It's so tempting. But the funny thing for me is, like, even when I was a kid, my parents never did really anything, probably because they were too busy trying to earn the money to raise their kids and feed them. But now it's the opposite, where I know people who have young kids, they just bring them to the restaurant with them, and which is great. The kids get socialized. But to go back to the question, saying yes is the most important when you're tempted to say no, but you also realize that there's potential and that you're giving up on that potential by saying no. And I think that's what needs to be addressed. I think if you're saying no and you know that saying yes could open something up for you, and you know that saying yes could potentially have an upside, but you're just being lazy or whatever, just realize that that might be where a certain level of depression comes from. I think being isolated and beating yourself up over not saying yes to something could kind of fuel that mild depression or even serious depression. So my solution is to always say yes to things that are possible and likely to have a positive outcome of any kind.
I can't remember who said this, but it was something like, adventure starts outside your house. So if we're inside, we're kind of in a little cocoon. It gets very comfortable, but meeting people and adventure all begins outside.
Absolutely. I think it helps to be a bit extroverted. I kind of would say I'm both. I could, because I like to draw, I like to write. I like to do things that require me to be alone for a dozen hours in a row sometimes, depending on how deep I get in. But I also love talking to people. I love meeting new people. I love learning about people. I love asking questions. I love, as much as I love to talk, I also like to listen. I do, I swear to God. But I think in this particular situation, I'm supposed to do this. I love riding motorcycles. And it's not just because I love riding motorcycles, which is being on a motorcycle and going down the road, and it's beautiful, and you feel all the weather, and you experience all of it, not like you would in a car with climate control and whatever. If it rains, you have to change your gear, or you have to get really wet and be uncomfortable, and you have to worry about how slippery it might be because you're only on two wheels and not four. And that's part of why I love riding motorcycles. You're responsible for a lot more of addressing physics that could result in potential injury. And that's interesting to me. But the other thing that I love about riding motorcycles is that every time you meet someone who also rides motorcycles, you're just friends. You can. I walked into a bar in Fredericksburg, and this guy staying at the bar sees me walking with a helmet in hand. He just smiles right. He looks at me and just his face lights up. He smiles, and we start talking, and we're friends, and that's it. And he probably never would have talked to me if I wasn't walking him with a motorcycle helmet and I just parked next to his motorcycle because he's also a motorcyclist. It's a bit of a club. I bet you've almost gotten run off the road by an 18-wheel before. I bet you've ridden in the rain. I bet you've ridden in the snow and the hail and the sleet. I bet you've been through it in that regard. And we both have that. And we both, it's like moms talking to each other. They both had kids. Like that's like extremely physically traumatizing and spiritually, I'm sure, I have no idea what it feels like, but it's got to be incredible that only a mom knows what it's like to do that. And it's similar with motorcycles. It's like there's between all the positive and all the negative or potentially negative, it's a unique thing that when you have that perspective and you've had that experience, you want to talk to other people who also, can relate to that, obviously.
What would you like our listeners and readers to take away from your book?
Yeah, I think it's say yes, do it. I don't want to get sued by Nike, but just do it. I think you regret the things you don't do. It's a line from a movie. I love the line. It's I think it's Al Pacino from it's David Mamet play that was made to a movie. And Glengarry Glen Ross. And it's true. There's a few things probably in my life that I've done. I try not to regret things that I've done because everything I've done has led to something, and there's probably been some positive thing that came from it. The only things I would ever regret are things that I feel might have hurt someone else. And I think that's just part of maturity. I think as a kid, you don't think about it. As a young adult, you don't think about it. As an adult, you start to think about it. Hopefully, if you're a decent person, not a sociopath. But I think anything that isn't going to hurt someone else that occurs to you that you might be interested in trying, do it. And don't worry that you can't do it. There's a song, sing a song, sing it loud and sing it strong. Don't worry, it's not good enough for anyone else to hear. Just sing a song. I think that's the best advice that anyone's ever gotten. I hope they still sing that in kindergarten like they did when I was a kid. Do as an experiment, just go out and stand in the middle of a square of a public place and just sing something, or like the movie Elf when he's singing, and like just that's happiness. When you can actually just not care if someone thinks you're a bad singer, when you can like express yourself creatively, emotionally, and not actually care whether someone might try to yuck your yum or tell you you're not good or you're not pretty enough or strong enough or tall enough or whatever enough, that's happiness. So what I hope is that people read this and go, look at this guy who's just a guy. He's just some person from a small town in Maine, and he grew up in a relatively poor household, went to public schools, went to community college, and somehow he ended up as a COO of this company, this pretty big company, this online company, and his advice is just keep going. Yes, be critical of yourself enough to make progress, but be forgiving of yourself enough to make progress, because you have to be both. If you're just critical, you're going to just crap on yourself and tell yourself you're not good and you're going to be depressed and whatever. And if you just tell yourself that you're great, you're not going to really learn the lessons and learn the skills. So I hope what anyone and everyone who reads my book takes away is that this guy is just a guy. He's just a person. And he's done enough things that he's pleased that he's been able to do, and he's still pursuing these things to do. And he's professionally happy with how things have turned out, and that he's someone who would consider himself successful without being famous or rich or all the things that everyone seems to think you have to be, without being an Instagram celebrity, without all those things. If he can do it, so can I. I just want everyone to say, there's that saying, anything you can do, I can do better. Well, anything I can do, anyone who reads my book can do. Better, worse, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But don't do it better, because I'll be hurt. Just kidding. I think that's what I would most hope for, is just if he can do it, so can I.
So, Kevin, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
You can, I'm on all the socials, GBOGFY. So at GBOGFY on Instagram, you can go to GBOGFY.com, and I have a contact form there. You can email me at kev@gbogfy.com. And I am happy to hear from you and would love to respond to you.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It was genuinely my pleasure. I've been looking forward to it ever since I scheduled it. And I am so happy to have been able to have a chat with you. And I hope people enjoy listening to it and respond well to it.
Well, thank you, Kevin. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, GBOGFY, The Earnest Pursuit of Personal Growth. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.